Okay, so we're going to pick up here with the cross elasticity and income elasticity of demand. Today, first we're going to address the cross elasticity of demand. And by definition, the cross elasticity of demand is very simply a measurement of the responsiveness of the demand for a good to a change in the price of a substitute or complement when other things remain the same. And so what we have is a very simple formula for the cross elasticity of demand, and it is that the cross elasticity of demand equals the percent change in quantity demanded of a good over the percent change in the price, but the price is of one of its complements or substitutes of simply a complement or a substitute. Okay, so the cross elasticity of demand is the percent change in quantity demanded over the percent change in the price of a complement or substitute. Now, there are a couple of rules that will apply to this cross elasticity of demand, and they might help us understand a little bit more. So, the first rule is that when the cross elasticity of demand for a substitute is always going to be positive. All right, and if you think about that, if we look at the definition of a substitute good, it's a good for which the quantity demanded will increase when the price of its substitute increases, and the quantity demanded will decrease when the price of its substitute decreases. Okay, so basically what it's saying is, if another good costs more, I'm going to buy more of my good, and if another good costs less, I'm going to buy less of this substitute, right? So if it's a substitute, it will be moving in the same direction, right? They will have the price of the good and the quantity demanded of its substitute will have a positive correlation, which means that you'll have either a negative over a negative or a positive over a positive, right? So for example, what we're going to see is when the price of a burger falls by 10%, okay, so if we have our formula out here, right, it's going to be percent change in quantity demanded over percent change in the price of the substitute, right? So the price of the substitute percent change is going to go as the denominator at 10%, and the quantity of pizza demanded will increase by 5%. So what we have is percent change in quantity demanded of 5 over the percent change in price of the substitute, which is a 10% change, right? And they're both negative, right? Because we know that we're going to see a negative 5% change in quantity demanded with a negative 10% change in the price of the substitute, giving us 0.5, right, as a positive number, because a negative over a negative equals a positive. Now, the second rule then follows the same exact theory, that the cross elasticity of demand for a complement is always negative, because there is going to be a negative correlation between the change in price of one good and the change in quantity demanded of its complement. Okay, so for example here, when the price of a soda falls by 10%, okay, so we have a negative 10%, right, because it went down, the quantity demanded of pizza increases by 2%, and that's going to be a positive 2, right, giving us a cross elasticity of demand of negative 0.2. Okay, and so we can see up here that when the two goods are substitutes, we have a positive cross elasticity of demand, and down here that when the two goods are negative, we're going to have a complement. The income elasticity of demand is a little different. in fact, the definition is a measurement of the responsiveness of the demand for a good to a change in income when all other things remain the same. So this basically says, look, if you look at the factors that can change demand, income was one of them. So basically, this is a measurement, a calculation of how much a change in income is going to cause a change in quantity demanded, right? And so the formula, again, is going to be similar, but a little different. The formula is that the income, the income elasticity of demand is going to equal the percent change in quantity demanded over the percent change in income. Now, again, similar, but you have to remember that the price of the good no longer matters because the price of the good cannot change. If you go back up to the definition, you look at the end of it, and it says when all other things remain the same. So all we're talking about here is a change in income. We are not talking about any changes in price, and that is reflected in the formula here, percent change in quantity demanded over the percent change in income. Now, this as well will have a couple rules, and they're pretty simple, okay? The first rule is that when the income elasticity of demand is greater than 1, we're looking at a normal good. And we're looking at a normal good that is income elastic. Okay? So again, if you remember that with just even going all the way back to price elasticity of demand, price elasticity of supply, we looked at the definitions, and anything greater than 1 was elastic, right? So an income elasticity of demand that's greater than 1 is income elastic, which would make it a normal good. If the income elasticity of demand is between 0 and 1, it's a normal good, and it's income inelastic, okay? We're keeping it here as a normal good. Anything above 0 is a normal good, right? But again, remembering that anything less than 1 was inelastic, right? We learn then that what we're looking at is income inelastic between 0 and 1. And finally, if the income elasticity of demand is less than 0, then very simply we are looking at an inferior good. What we can then gather from that information is very simple as well, right? If you're looking at a good that is a normal good and that is income elastic, okay, what you're looking at is something that probably takes up a fairly decent proportion of our income. And the more income elastic it is, meaning the higher its elasticity, its income elasticity of demand, the greater the amount of our income it tends to take up, or it does take up. So, for example, if you look at airline travel, you see that that according to government numbers, airline travel has an income elasticity of 5.82, which basically means that you are looking at 582%, right? 582%. So that's a huge, it obviously doesn't take up 582% of our income, but if you're looking at a percent change in quantity demanded over a percent change in price, it basically means that for all intents and purposes, the percent change in quantity demanded is going to be 5.82 times higher than the percent change in price. That's a huge difference. Going into to look at, for example, newspapers. Newspapers have an income elasticity of 0.38, okay, which means that they take up a significantly smaller portion of our income, and so we're not going to react as drastically to a price change. To any price change, it's going to take a significant price change in order to cause a somewhat significant reaction at the market.